While the Constructors' battle seems to be solely in McLaren's control, or lack of control, the midfield battle is anything but decided. Each race, in the past couple of races, there has been different teams that have finished best of the rest. And by best of the rest, I mean every other team apart from the top 3 teams and Max Verstappen. Yep, Max Verstappen is his own team. No cap. In Imola, the Williams was giving Ferrari a run for its money on pure pace. But after Spain and Canada, I believe there's another dark horse in the midfield race that could spring a surprise. And that is none other than Kick Sauber. And before y'all think that I'm crazy, let's dive into the data to see if they really are going to be challenging for the midfield crown. Let's look at the Spanish GP qualifying plot. At first glance, it doesn't look so good for Sauber. They got one car in Q2, and then one car got knocked out in Q1. So nothing too special. And an Alpine, a Racing Bulls, a Williams, and an Aston outqualified them. So not particularly great for Sauber in terms of the qualifying outright pace. And if you look at the qualifying time delta to the pole sitter, here also they aren't looking that much better. They're about 1.2 seconds slower than the pole sitter's time, whereas some of their peers or the other midfield teams that they're battling are about 0.7 of a second slower. So you got the Alpine, the Racing Bulls, and again the Aston Martin. So again, from outright pace and gap to the leaders, they're not doing that well. In fact, if we compare the 2024 qualifying to the 2025 qualifying and contrast the lap times, almost every team was slower in 2025 than in 2024. Williams was the only team that was quicker in 2025 compared to the previous year. And the only other team that was worse than Sauber was the Haas. And so Haas was comparatively the second worst performing team in terms of improvement, or I guess in terms of minimizing their loss compared to the previous year. Even in the overall pecking order for qualifying, they don't look so hot. In fact, they were leapfrogged by Williams, who were previously the worst team in qualifying trim. And because they were one of the only teams that improved, even they now leapfrogged them. So the only other team slower than them is Haas, whereas every other midfield team is quicker than them. And again, square represents 2025 and the circle represents 2024. So if your lap time compared to the pole sitter is farther to the right, that means you're slower. So the more left you are to the lap time, the closer you are to the pole sitter and the more competitive you are. Moving to the Canadian GP qualifying plot, here also nothing too special about the Sauber. Again, Hülkenberg gets the car into Q2, but Bortoleto misses out in Q2 and then ends up only in Q1. And here again, you have the Racing Bull of Hadjar, you got the Williams, and you got the Alpine of Colapinto outperforming them. So again, not a great showing. In fact, it shows that they are smack dab in the middle of the midfield teams. But if we move over to the Canadian GP qualifying time delta, here we see some bits of interesting information. While the time delta seems to be pretty bad, they're again about 1.2 seconds off the pole lap time. If you look at some of their other competitors, the Williams and Racing Bulls, they're only now about a second off the pace, whereas earlier at Spain, they were only 0.7 off the pace. So comparatively to their competitors, they're a lot closer. Or in other words, their competitors were a lot slower compared to the pole time. So Sauber were in the mix, but again, clearly not the best of the rest. And you can see that in the overall qualifying pecking order chart, that Sauber is right there. They're in the mix for the fight. Aston Martin, again, is a little bit of an outlier. Williams, also still within that ballpark. They're not too far ahead. So they're smack dab in the middle of the midfield fight. Again, nothing too special about them. But if you look at 2024 performance, Sauber were basically dead last. So the fact that they are competitive with the other midfield teams over here means that they made a huge improvement. And you can see that in the year-over-year team performance delta. Sauber made the biggest gains compared to any other team. They made a gain of almost about 1.2 seconds compared to the previous year. and only Ferrari came close to them. And even Ferrari, I feel like the gains were inflated due to the fact that they had such a poor performance in 2024, where both the cars got knocked out in Q2. And if you compare some of their other competitors, they made really slight gains or moderate gains compared to Sauber. So that's why you can see that Sauber was well in the mix in qualifying. But even after all of these graphs and data points, nothing in them screams that Sauber is showing signs of dominating the midfield. But if you look at the results from the last two races, they have clearly made a step with back-to-back points scoring races and the updates in Spain. So let's look at the race pace of Kick Sauber, and let's go one race before their updates in Spain. So in Imola, here's what I did. I plotted the average lap time across all stints during the race and tried to show the difference in time compared to the race leader's average lap time, which would obviously be the quickest average lap time. And so remember in Imola, Williams, especially the Williams of Albon, had a really good showing. Williams was really quick because they were fighting with the Ferraris right till the very end. So they had quite a bit of pace, and it isn't surprising that they have the least gap to the race leader's average time. And if you look at Hülkenberg here, his average race pace across all the stints was about 1.8 seconds off the race leader's average race time. So again, nothing too great. But now moving on to Spain, and this is where they had the updates, Hülkenberg now is 1.56 seconds off the pace. But crucially, he is basically the same as Alonso's Aston Martin. And although, again, he's not the outright fastest in the midfield, he is a lot closer to the Racing Bulls of Hadjar, who's about 1.3 seconds off the pace in race trim. And we move another race forward, and now you come to Canada. Now you can see that Hülkenberg is only 1 second off the pace of the average race pace across all stints. And again, he's not the outright fastest, but he's really darn close to Alonso. And we all know that Alonso is capable of doing magic and extracting more out of the car than it's actually worth. So across all the three races, if you go back in time, they had the most gap to the average race pace in Imola, but then steadily reduced that gap over the three races. And if they continue on this trajectory, I think that over the summer, they could well be the dark horse of the midfield. And if they keep getting themselves in point scoring situations through their improved race pace and capitalization of race conditions through strategy, like they did in Spain, I think we could be witnessing some really good surprises from the Kick Sauber team. What do y'all think? Is Sauber worthy of the dark horse badge, or is Williams or some other team still the better midfield team? Let me know.